was thinking about those two things, about Greek tragedies and about the way objects come to define families. And
Mhm.
so this necklace in the novel is really this object that kind of defines the family in a really interesting way, and of course is lost.
Welcome to our latest episode of Book Reporter Talks To, where our guest today is Katy Hays, and we are going to be talking about her really terrific book, Saltwater, which is my latest Book Reporter Bets On selection. I love this book. Notice I have the green sweater that I just bought, and it just happens to match the cover. Like, go pull that out of the closet, okay? This is a book that I first listened to on audio, and I really enjoyed listening to the ensemble cast. And the one thing about audio, it tells you how many hours you have left to listen, but not how many pages. So yesterday I flipped over and started reading the print, realizing we were going to be talking today, and I needed to finish the book, and I didn't have enough audio time left. But the audio is terrific, and we're going to talk about that later. Julie Clark, the New York Times bestselling author of The Last Flight, says this about Saltwater. Engrossing and sinister, Saltwater has all the elements thriller writers love: dead bodies, deception, and betrayal. But at its core, this multi layered story delves into the concepts of familial loyalty and generational trauma, making Saltwater a must read. I have to say, when I picked it up, I had no idea this was thriller. Like, I just picked this up because I love the cover and I felt like I want to be on spring break in my office. Okay. People magazine had this to say: it's perfect for fans of White Lotus. This is spring break murder. See, I was on track. A mystery for the ages. And I so agree. And with that intro, welcome, Katy. It's so nice to meet you.
Thank you so much for having me, Carol.
I'm telling you, this is the spring break cover. I'm telling you right now.
It really does feel like a vacation in a book, which is what I want it to feel like.
Vacation in a book. I'm like absolutely ready. But I have to say, I picked it up and I must have missed a thriller because I picked it up and reading the story of this family. And then I'm like, oh, somebody went missing. And then I'm like, whoa, we went. So obviously, I did not do my complete research ahead of time of reading. But as I was reading, I was way into the book, way into it. So can you share us an overview of Saltwater?
Yeah, of course. I've been saying that it's the story of a family who has everything and three women who will stop at nothing to escape them. And it is a novel about the Lingate family, who are an affluent old money family from Los Angeles, who every year go on vacation to a specific villa on the island of Capri for 1 week. And 30 years ago, a member of their family died under suspicious circumstances. And although the death was ruled an accident, they have lived under the shadow of suspicion for 30 years. And when they return to the island for their annual vacation, it happens again, and another member of their party is found dead below the cliffs. And it is about the way the family fractures under this renewed scrutiny 30 years after the first event.
And they're coming after them 30 years after the first event of like, what really did happen? You know, was this an easy, was it easy to say that like this is the place it's going to be and like setting up? I mean, I'm sure you had to travel and a hardship of going to Capri to actually do some research. Sure, that was really, really, really tough.
Yeah, I mean, that's why we all get into writing, right? So we can write off vacations. No, it's funny. I always knew it would be set on Capri, and I'm not entirely sure why, although I had recently read, before I started working on the novel, I had read a book called Pagan Light, which was about the artistic legacy of Capri. And I'm a big fan of the writers Graham Greene and Shirley Hazard. And Graham Greene lived for years during the off season on the island. And Shirley Hazard wrote a memoir about visiting him while he was on the island. And I had read that and I was so taken with her descriptions of the island and the way she wrote about it and the way Graham Greene has written about it that I thought it was the perfect place to set a novel. And then I did go, obviously, for research. I forced my husband. We were in northern Italy on vacation. We're mountain people, not beach people, to be clear. And I asked him if he would be willing to drive 9 hours in August Italian traffic
Mm.
down all the way past Naples so that we could catch a ferry to Capri. And my husband, bless him, was like, sure. We got on the autostrada and struggled with, us and thousands of Germans going south for vacation. So, yeah, and it was a wonderful trip.
Yeah, and it's, you go to a place like that and you start envisioning the story more because you see that little corner place or you see a place where you're going to get something to drink and then you're watching the people and you're saying, okay, walk down this street, what could happen going down this block or whatever. For readers who like me do not know geography that well, how big is the island of Capri? Is it big island? What are we talking?
No, I mean, it's bigger than you think it is. It's divided into two separate sections, Anna Capri and Capri itself, and both are separated by this kind of swale in the middle of the island. And Anna Capri is much more kind of a locals Italian destination. And Capri, the town itself, is more kind of international
Mhm.
glamour, what we think of when we think of the island. I think it's probably like somewhere between 5 and 10 miles long and about 2 or 3 miles wide, give or
Wow.
take. So it's bigger than you think, but it's not large. It's not like Sardinia, for example, which is pretty sizable, or Sicily, which is also sizable. But no, I like to say that I really think that a place should provide for the narrative. So
Mhm.
whenever I'm researching a book, I love to visit the location, and I really feel like the location provides for where I want to take the novel and where the story is going to go and how the scenes are going to work.
Yeah, it's the setting's got to be good, and it's got to be a place where you could run into other people. You
Yes.
couldn't, you can't really, always sit and hide because that's part of the thing that's going on in this book is where are we seeing people? Are we seeing them again? Who is this? I'm very impressed that the woman died, and for 30 years, the family goes back the same week of her death. And it's not like they're going back to commemorate or everything. They're going back to go to parties and celebrate. And I'm like, wow, that is kind of an interesting vibe right there on who this family is.
Yeah, I mean, I think it's really dark. And I have thought a lot, when I was writing the novel, I was talking to someone else and they asked me if there was any sort of like true crime origin for this book. And initially I had thought no, but then, in many respects, it's a lot like the case of Natalie Wood's death, right?
Mhm.
She is found dead, it's ruled an accident. And, for however many years, we have really wondered what happened on the boat that night. And I think that this family is very much experiencing that same kind of suspicion, that same cloud. And I think they go to the island every year to prove that it was just an accident, right? As long as they keep going back, nobody's going to suspect that it was murder.
Of course, they're coming back. It's to celebrate their lives. It was just oh so sad what happened to her.
Well, you
And
don't want to give up a great vacation spot just because of one terrible thing.
just one death. I mean, come
Yeah.
on, like seriously. Family drama is so great as a plot line as well. So tell me what you love about writing family drama. What did you love about assigning these characters who they were?
I think the family is the most interesting unit in literature. And I think many novelists before me have obviously taken aim or focused on the family. And I love the family because I always joke that it's the cult we can never leave, right? If you get involved in NXIVM, your mom can come spring you out of NXIVM, but nobody is really going to help you get out of your family except yourself, right? If you have a kind of toxic family environment. I also think that there's no one who can push your buttons better than family. Nowhere is there more subtext than within a family conversation. If you've ever been on, I personally have been on plenty of large extended family vacations, and you just watch those resentments simmer and those competitions simmer, and the kind of, no matter how much you love each other, you can't help but kind of needle one another. And I think that that's what's so fascinating for me about family is the amount of kind of unsaid emotion, unsaid resentment that exists just below the surface. And, I think that Capri as a place is so much about superficiality. And I don't mean that in like the way people, are superficial, but I mean like about surface. It's really interested on what we can see. And I think that the family is so invested in just keeping that veneer, but underneath there's just so much churning away.
So much. And if you marry into that family, it's just like, what is your life going to be like? You meet this guy, and then all of a sudden you're marrying his whole family as well. And it's like, that's not what I signed up for. That's not what I signed up for. One of the things that I want to talk about is the necklace, because this necklace plays, and at the beginning, you're not really describing the necklace. It's a gold necklace. It's a gold necklace and it's got, a serpent on it and whatever, but you're not really seeing what the necklace is. And later on, the description comes more out. Did you always know that you were going to have a piece of jewelry like that in it? And was there something specific that inspired it?
Yeah, it's funny. When I started thinking about this book, I actually went back and read a lot of Greek tragedies,
Mm.
mostly because I was really interested in this idea of families falling apart, and Greek tragedies are great for that. Nobody dismantles the family more than kind of, the authors of those early plays. And so I was reading a lot of them, and I was thinking about the way in which objects can come to kind of curse a family or become really important for families or become these kinds of symbols of what families have. Like if you've have you ever watched like Antiques Roadshow, for
Yeah.
example?
Yeah.
Okay, so I love Antiques Roadshow, and everyone shows up to Antiques Roadshow with this like object that they've been told in their family is this like great thing. And over the years, it develops this kind of patina of meaning, right? First it starts out, let's say that it's like a painting by a relative, but then, another generation goes by and we're like, maybe actually it's from the school of like, the impressionist like adjacent school. And then, a few more generations go by and it keeps getting twisted until suddenly you think this thing you have is like a great work of art, a lost masterpiece. And so you bring it to Antiques Roadshow and they're like, I'm sorry, it's really pretty, but it's worth like $500. And so I was thinking about those two things, about Greek tragedies and about the way objects come to define families. And
Mhm.
so this necklace in the novel is really this object that kind of defines the family in a really interesting way. And of course, is lost when Sarah, the wife of Richard Lingate, dies in 1992. And so I wanted to really think about the way in which we invest meaning in these objects as generational objects, not just kind of as, great pieces of jewelry, but as, I don't know, hopes and dreams for what we are as people, if
Uh-huh.
that makes sense.
Years ago, somebody who was very influential in the art world gave us these two vases, and they were friends of my parents. My mother goes, "Oh, they must have bought them here. They're the other place." I didn't give it the two thoughts. It was like, okay, they're fine. And one time, my husband picked them up and it said "Made in China" on the bottom, and my husband just sat there going, "It just shows the myth of what somebody who has really great taste could sit there and portray about what's going on with these." It was one of those funny moments where you just drop a line and you're like, okay, check, like check that moment.
Well, you watch it on Antiques Roadshow so often, right? You see the light go out of people's eyes as they're told that their like cherished family heirloom is not really valuable.
No, no, but this is the thing you love. And so we've got this necklace that has shown up again. And this is the really weird thing is this woman was wearing this necklace 30 years ago. And all of a sudden now this summer, the necklace is back. And everybody's like, the necklace is back. Like, is she back? Like, what's going on? Like, how did this necklace come back? And where's it been all this time? And I think that was just one of those moments of, woo, okay, where are we going here, folks?
Yeah, no, and I love the idea. I really like in novels when there are objects that move the story along too. Like I'm a big fan of maybe it's Anne Lamott who calls them magical objects, but I just love their appearance in novels and they always end up appearing in my novels at
Right.
least.
There's a gorgeous hairbrush, the gorgeous this or that that's come down from somebody, bought at the drugstore. Who is your favorite character to write in this book?
Oh my gosh. I mean, honestly, it's funny because we were talking briefly before we came on about White Lotus, and I think White Lotus is such a great ensemble cast. And I always, impressed to pick a favorite on the show. And I feel the same way about this novel. I loved so much writing. I will say I loved writing the women, all of the
Mhm.
women. And
Mhm.
so I think they were my favorite to write. In particular, Naomi, the aunt, who's kind of drugged up on pills all the time. She's very much Parker Posey on this season of White Lotus.
But she
And
has her lorazepam. It's
she
not
does
gone.
have her Loraz. She's got more than lorazepam for
Yeah.
sure.
Yeah.
And Lorna, of course, who appears, and even the flashback chapters with Sarah in 1992, I think I really enjoyed writing.
hmm See, I loved Helen because I love that she's A, trying to get out, and
Yeah.
B, the way they've tried to keep her down. Like she's at UCLA, USC, UCLA.
USC, yeah.
Yeah, she's at school. She gives an interview. They get the interview killed. They get everything like taken down about this. And then from there, she is shepherded to and from school by well, it sounds like a guard instead of a chauffeur, taking her places. And every place she goes, they know exactly what time she should get there, be home. And she's not really having some life. She's now, I figure at this book, 33 years old because I
Yeah.
think she was 3 when her mom died. And she really has no life. And she was my favorite because she's trying to figure out how to break out. And then she's with Lorna, which it's early in the book. She tries to drown her. So this woman has got so much going on for her. And it's like, what is going to happen for her next? Like, what's going on? So I thought she was my favorite character because she's sort of caught up in this thing, but she was the kid and she's sort of looking around like, okay, who are these people? And they're really crazy. I know they're
Yeah.
crazy. Yeah.
Yeah, and I think it's really interesting too. I think it's hard to imagine the level of control that a family like that can exert over
hmm
somebody. But I
hmm
think it's very true. I think that money is such a control mechanism. And then outside of money, like I said, families are the cults we can't escape. When you grow up with a set of expectations over what you do, when you want to please your parents, I mean, it takes so long to kind of come to terms with the fact that the way you're living, the way you've experienced the world through your family is not normal. And I think in this novel, Helen has only just kind of come to terms with the fact that none of this is normal. And she now realizes that in order to get out, she's going to have to take some really drastic steps.
And everybody thinks if you have money, everything's okay. And that's the other thing the book is showing. Because so many people say, if I only had this much money, it would all be fine. If I only did this. And you prove that the rich too have issues. And it's so amusing. There's something I remember years ago, and I don't know why this stuck with me. The first year I went out to Vail to ski, there were these two women in the locker room, and they each had two children with them. And they go, that's it. Next year, we're going to the Caribbean. No more of this going to Vail or Aspen. This is way too much work. And every single time I've carried my skis or watched somebody any place doing something that's really hard, it's like, oh no, we can't do this again. And it was just one of those moments of, yes, I've got a lot of money, but this is way too much work. This is not what I'm going to do. Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, we see that. I was saying earlier, I live in a ski town, so I see that all the time. And my husband and I always joke we call it unhappy family. Like you can spot them from a mile away. You can hear the child screaming at the top of their lungs. Well, as you ride the chairlift up, and we always say, "Oh no, there's an unhappy family." And I do think it's interesting. It's the novel, sometimes people describe it as rich people behaving badly, but I actually think it's so much more about what happens when there's a threat to that kind of
Oh,
wealth
yeah.
and
Yeah.
when there's a risk of losing it, and also when there's an intense feeling that you don't have enough. Because, of course, the Lingate family is in dialogue with, another character in the novel who has more money than they'll ever have. And the kind of insecurities that that brings out in people. And I think I'm really interested in the way I'm just really interested in money, to be
Mhm.
honest, as a kind of class force, as a narrative force, as, a power mechanism. I mean, I think you can look around America today and see why it's such a fascinating
It
topic.
really, it absolutely truly is. And it's one of those things that's a barometer that people understand. You don't understand a lot of things, but you understand the barometer of money and what having the money means. And one friend I remember one time got a plane and I said, oh, it's so great you got a plane. They go, yeah, but so-and-so's got a bigger plane. And I was just there like, oh my gosh, is this really what it comes down to? Maybe I don't want a plane anymore. I really thought I'd like to fly private. I guess not. And I remember overhearing, and I think part of it is also what you say, overhearing people in the chairlift, overhearing people talking. So it was this one time I was in the nail salon and people were getting ready. This is like August for going away for the holiday. And they said, oh, the flights to Aruba are so expensive. We should just put together a group and just do net jets. And I was just laughing so hard. So for a long time, I was on one of those net jet lists. I have no idea how I got on it. And they would say things like, reserve your spot for parking your plane for the Super Bowl. And I would sit there and go, I'm A, going to the Super Bowl, and B, I have a plane. Like, these are things I never had to think about. Like, that would be another level of, because there are only so many slots at the airport. I was like, that would be like a real lot of work. That would be like something else that I have to tick the box on or assign to somebody and make
Yeah.
sure they're good.
Yeah.
A lot
No,
of
I
work.
think it's true. It's funny. You said that money is something that we can all relate to. And I feel the same way about family, right? Your
Yes.
family may not be like the Lingate family, but I think that there's something in the family operation and family dynamic that you can probably understand.
Yeah. Yeah. Definitely. Definitely. I also love this line about the emperor who first ruled the island of Capri and his horrific habits of whoring and killing. Was it because they were bored? Like the ballets, the performances, the affairs, the cheating, the obsessing, the drinking, the drugs, the parties, the flights, the shopping, the lounging, the killing. Not much changed on that island over the years. And
Yeah.
it's like these are the things that people are going to think about and worry about. And you have to be a very special person to be, I'm not going to deal with it at all. I'm just going to get there and have a good time.
Yeah, I think that's true. And I am so interested in, like I said, I'm really interested in the way place can provide for the narrative. And
Hmm.
I think the island of Capri in this book is very much, we talk about location and setting being a character, but in this case, it really was true for me. And I really felt like the island had this fascinating history. It had this really interesting trajectory from kind of a Roman imperial seat to, being a place where avant-garde artists found refuge and privacy to being this incredibly glamorous destination for oligarchs and, the celebrities. And I mean, I love so much that every time you get to around July or August, and if you follow like TMZ or
Yeah.
Us Weekly, you always end up with like the celebrity paps in, Capri. And you've got like Ben Affleck and Jennifer Lopez like holding hands, walking down the street. You've got like Leonardo DiCaprio. It's like everyone shows up, and it's this I mean, it's a really concentrated space to have that much money, glamour, celebrity, in one place at one time.
Right. I think Jeff Bezos is getting married off the coast of Italy. So you just like have no
Oh,
idea is this where it's going to be? We'll buy out the town. Yes, that's what we'll do,
on the yacht, probably.
Yeah, yeah, probably on the yacht, which will take, how many people. I also love this line. I'm sure that what they told you, but that's the funny thing about family stories. They so rarely are the truth. And there are so many things that get embellished over the years. So let's talk about the family and the stories because it's such the heart of your book in a lot of ways, all the stories these people are sharing along the way.
Yeah, it's funny. It is, like I said, that kind of Antiques Roadshow thing. I think every family is similar in this way. And I've seen it in my own family. I see it in like friends' families. I see it in the way that narratives develop in my own marriage over time. You start with kind of a seed of a story, and just the gradual retelling of it reshapes it time and time again. And I think by the time a story gets to be, in the case of the Lingates, the sort of origin story of their wealth, by the time it gets to be 100 years old, let's say, it has dramatically changed from the original thing that happened. And that
Mhm.
happens because in particular in families, we love to kind of narrativize our own lives,
Mhm.
right?
Mhm.
When my grandparents at least got older, they loved nothing more than talking about their experience in childhood and their experience growing up and their own parents and their own grandparents. And it's interesting because, of course, those stories changed even from my earliest time remembering hearing them to when I heard them sort of the last time before my grandparents passed away. And I find that to be really, really fascinating. I mean,
Mhm.
they are these kind of, the book is very much, like I said, it's very rooted in this kind of Greek tragedy. It's in the Mediterranean. It has a lot of kind of just big mythology lurking in the eaves of it. And it is very much about the way families mythologize themselves.
Mhm. Yeah, yeah. And it's interesting. Like there was one woman we knew, and her family had a lot of money, And you meet people in your 20s and you have no idea what the backstory is. Like you just don't know. And somebody said to me once, "Do you know where her father made her money?" And I go, "No." He goes, "Porta potties." And I was like, and if you're just thinking of like, well, where did the money come from? The money came from porta potties. And you're just sitting there. So then when you see this person and they're talking about their wealth and all this thing, all you see is porta potties. Like it's like, even if they're the really nice ones, that's all you can see. That's all you can see. And let's talk about Saltwater, the play, because she's written a book called Saltwater. And let's talk about what Sarah saw in that or what Sarah did in that play that really flipped out the whole family.
Yeah, so there is kind of a book within a book quality to this novel because the wife of Richard Lingate, Sarah, who dies in 1992, she is a playwright and she has this long hiatus from writing plays. She has this like very towering career in New York. She gets married, she moves to Los Angeles with her husband to care for his alien, his father is kind of alien and there's family business to attend to, and they move to the West Coast. And she has this long hiatus from writing, and she finally sits down and writes a play that is, nominally based on the family that she has married into. And it is pretty much in every respect like a Romana play.
Hmm.
So she writes this play, and of course she gives it to her husband to read because her agent says you need him to read this before we can do anything with it, and he loses his mind because he's worried about the public scrutiny on the family. And it's interesting, when the reader gets to the end of this novel, I think they will understand why there's so much concern around the public scrutiny, and
Hmm.
it's why I'm so hesitant to attach a rich people behaving badly kind of moniker to this, because I think that it really asks the question of who has money and who has power in this narrative, and it's not at all who you think has money and power. And so Sarah's play basically is a risky thing that might expose the truth about the family, and it's for this reason that she's so concerned. And I loved the idea. Like I said, I read a lot of Greek tragedies when
Hmm.
I was starting to write the book, and so I loved the idea that she would also be a playwright.
Yeah, she's a playwright and she's got some acclaim. She's got more acclaim than her husband has in a lot of ways, and he's just jealous of her as well. I mean, the whole
Yeah.
thing, and it's a really, really great synopsis. I like the description of the play is the gradual disintegration of the siblings, their fortune and their fortunes. And I was like, I really love that. Very, very apt description of what you think this play would be about. Money can lead to a lot of power, and the power to stop the story. And they stop so much of what's going on. So let's talk about power in the book because it's not just money, it's who's sitting down. These are the groundwork of how you work when you live in this family. This is what you do and don't do. So where's the power coming from? Is it the men, the women? Who's wielding it?
I think it's really interesting that in a lot of families like this, there is often pressure or emphasis put on the prodigal son, right? There's this idea, even in the most enlightened families, I would say, that there's a son to carry on the name, that there's the son who's going to do the work, that it's going to be a patrilineal kind of successive march to the top. And I think that this novel is very much instead about the way women operate in these traditionally patriarchal environments. And I do think the family, no matter how enlightened we are today, and I think we've come a long way, I think the family is it is the defining patriarchal unit of our times and of our lives. And I think that this book is very much about how women navigate those waters. And so for me, I was really interested in the way women had more control, perhaps, than the men in this book. And control doesn't just come in the form, the power, the control doesn't just come in the form of finances, right? Lorna, this character who is an assistant to the elder brother Marcus, she has so much more power than so many people in this story because she has information.
Mhm.
And that information, and she also has like a gutsiness. So
Mhm.
she can use that information in ways that are very empowering and that give her a lot of agency in the book.
Mhm.
I also think, too, there are ways in which the men in the book are so dependent on the women around them. They're really dependent on the women around them, not just, you know, I don't want to just say for power, but because they love the way they're reflected in the women
Yes.
that they select, right? And even the character Stan, who is this kind of, he's like an older bro oligarch, right? Like he exited with Netscape. Like he didn't exit with like Airbnb, right? So he's like an older bro oligarch. Even he is so obsessed with this idea that he wants to see himself as like virile and attractive in the young women around him. And so I think I was really interested in when it came to power dynamics and money, I was really interested in kind of thinking about the ways in which women could operate in that environment without necessarily using finances as their currency.
Hmm. Yeah. It's like this is like how are you going to move around and what is going to happen? What are you going to do? And I really love this line where Freddie, who is dating Naomi, turns around. Now, Freddie, who's no, he's not dating
Dating
Naomi. No, no,
Helen.
no, that would not be good. He's dating Helen. I'm sorry. No, 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 not dating Naomi.
Yeah.
But he's got this line about, and Naomi says that there's nothing that a good gift can't fix. And that says something about what she's been through in life. And you feel like she's been presented with many a beautiful gem in her day as a payoff for something to happen that was not supposed to happen by Marcus. It was just,
Yeah.
you were not supposed to do this. But she just feels that the gift, still, it's a great thing. I'll take the gift.
I also think that's a generational difference between her and Helen and Freddie, right? That there is this kind of Naomi's willingness to look the other way
Hmm.
might not be something that Helen herself in her early 30s would be willing to do. And it's funny, we've been talking about characters. I totally forgot about Freddie, and I love Freddie so much in this book. He's like a safe harbor, a little comic relief.
But there's also this moment where Freddie says something and Helen says something that is just like so funny. The two of them go back and forth, and I'm like, oh my gosh, that was a really funny. That could be a really funny scene. I can see it now of the two of them sitting down and like having these conversations. But also, I realized that Sarah also did not want that gem. Instead, she
Yeah.
wanted the play. She wanted her life. She did not just want to be able to pick up a necklace, a ring, or a bracelet. And if that was going to be the commodity that he was giving her, she just wanted a divorce. She just wanted out, you know?
Yeah.
So, so when you sat down to write this book, did you have the entire story in your head? Did you know all the characters? Where were you?
No, I mean, that's so funny. I never know where a book is going when I sit down and start writing. The only thing I had when I started writing this novel was the idea that a man would be on vacation in the place where his wife had died, and that he would be haunted by her. And I didn't know whether or not the haunting would take a literal form, like a ghostly haunting. I didn't know if he would just feel her presence. I didn't know if he would think that he saw her in the town. I wasn't sure about any of that. And the way I write, I just usually start with a question or an idea, and then I just keep iterating and working through. So the book that is published didn't come until probably like the fifth or sixth draft of the novel.
Right.
And I spent a lot of time, throwing away old drafts and working new ideas and kind of finding the right characters for the book. So I will say, no, I never know where a novel is going. And I also never know the end of a novel when I
Uh-huh.
start it.
And so do you write in order? Do you write everything in order?
I
Like
do.
then, now, then, like you didn't do all the then parts and then all the now parts. No.
No, I
Like,
do it by feel. So I always write chronologically. Like I always write start to finish in a book. I never write scenes out of order. And I do that in part because I think it gives you a better sense, especially in a multi POV, multi timeline novel. It gives you a better feel for when you want those shifts to come. Because you in the writing will notice, like, oh, I feel like we haven't been with this character for a while. I feel like we haven't been in this timeline for a while. And so then you can make the shift as you're drafting.
right. You can sit there and say, okay, then now or we can just do a page on this just to
Yeah.
get everybody into what this particular thing is. So, how different was writing this book than writing your debut novel, The Cloisters?
Oh my gosh. I mean, the thing that is hardest about the second novel, and I really do mean this, everyone says don't read your reviews. There's no way you're going to avoid your reviews. You are 100% going to read every Goodreads review for like the first 3 months. And I think the hardest thing for me is I wrote The Cloisters with no expectations, no publishing deal for myself in my dining room. Everything was easy. And then I was really optimistic that I would get an operational draft of my second book before The Cloisters came out, and that didn't happen. And I really paid the price because I
Mhm.
think it's really difficult to write your second book in the wake of your first book coming
Mhm.
out. So I think for me, what was really challenging was just finding a way to get back to the work and ignoring the chatter of, how the first book was doing, whether or not readers were liking it, who was connecting with it, what the reviews were. And I think that was really the hardest part. But, I'm happy to say that, I mean, this book is out now. I just delivered a third book to my editor.
Wow.
And I'm happy to say that it was really only a second book experience. I now have no problem with it at all. I don't even think about it. I'm happy to work through all of that. It doesn't bother me. But I did have to learn how to write through the noise, which was the
Mhm.
hardest thing about it.
Yeah, it's hard because you're sitting here saying, "Oh, she didn't develop character." Well, you also have no idea who's saying this. You have no idea who wrote this on Goodreads and what else you never look at see what else they've reviewed. You just see what they're
Right.
looking at as your piece of what they're saying and things like that. And sometimes I think it's really helpful to read the ones and the twos just to see if you really did either make a mistake or not develop something completely. I mean, it's really an interesting moment to do this. But you don't know who the people are that are saying this. I mean, if you're sitting in a book group with your friends and somebody says something, oh, okay, I know where that's coming from. You have no idea. I have no idea on some of this. And you're right, delivering the second book when you're out for the first time, doing the read with Jenna, doing the like out there, got that. That's a lot. It's a lot to be talking about a book when you're not writing, when you're supposed to be writing the next book. And you have, I think it's 3 years in between. And in some ways, it's a good thing because it
Yeah.
takes you time to finish the other, talk about it in paperback, and then, okay, we're moving on, folks, you know?
Yeah, and of course, inevitably when your first book ends up as like a huge book club pick, you know the second book is going to have some middle child syndrome
Hmm.
because it is, you punched the lottery ticket with your first novel. And that is such an incredible and lucky experience for a first-time novelist like myself. It is like winning the lottery, and I think that that is one of the things you have to overcome as you write the next book is okay, this will be a different experience,
Hmm.
but that
Yeah,
doesn't mean it's a bad experience. And I think the thing that's great though, I really do think, Carol, that you get better the more you do this.
you
You
do.
you really do. And I think that that's one of the things that's hard is you get a lot of attention for the debut, but actually I think you're a better writer after the second, third, fourth, fifth book.
And also, if the fourth or the fifth is not as good as one, two, and three, you know it and you know what to do with six. And something
Yes.
will happen. Something happens in your personal life or something happens when you're writing the book that it just doesn't get to where you want it to gel. It's sort of like you're making jello and you're like, okay, is it ready? Is it really ready? Is it really ready? And sometimes it just doesn't work. And you just have to put that aside
Yeah.
and keep on going. And it
Yeah.
may not be the second book. It may be the sixth or the 10th or whatever that's just not as good. And you work through it and you say, okay, I'm just going to keep going. I know what I can, I know what I'm
Yeah.
able to do. I know what I'm able
Which
to
is
achieve.
exactly what happened with this novel, actually. I started writing this novel, Saltwater. I could not figure out how to make the book work. I set it aside. I wrote a totally different novel that I ended up not liking and said, you know what, that's not it. I'm going to go back and try to figure out how to make this book work.
Hmm.
And I did, and I ended up being really happy. And I felt like it was a really fascinating process, and I really enjoyed it.
Yeah, and it was for you to say took 4 or 5 tries to get to where I wanted to go, even on this one.
Yeah.
It's the amount of effort that goes into making a book, and making a movie is a lot of people. Okay, so when people sit there and compare like a movie ticket to like this or whatever, this is one person that's sitting there trying to deliver a piece of entertainment to you that you're going to enjoy. Yes, there's going to be an editor involved, and yes, da da da, but really. There's not actors, there's not actresses, there's this one person. And when you look at the price or you look at whatever for the book, you have to sit there and say, But this is what this person did, and they put it aside four, five, six times, and they put aside a whole manuscript to get to this one. And this is really good because they did all those other things. And it's hard for, average readers don't really think about that. They're just like, is it a good book or a bad book, not knowing what the history was.
Yeah. No, it's interesting. And I'm so fascinated too. I have a background in art history. That's what I did before. It's what I still teach.
Right.
And I am so fascinated in the body of work.
Hmm.
So I always think about artists in terms of their entire artistic production from like their first painting to their last. And I am also equally fascinated by writers and their body of work because I'm a big Patricia Highsmith and Shirley Jackson fan. I've read all of their novels and like, especially Patricia Highsmith, who has a ton of novels, some of them are uneven. And you're like,
Yes. Uneven
Patty, I
work.
don't really know what was happening here, but I mean, I enjoyed it. I'm along for the ride. I'm a fangirl for life. But, at the same time, you think, it's interesting to see like do you get Ripley if you don't get some of those earlier novels that aren't they're almost there and they're not there. And I don't know if you do get Ripley without that earlier work. And so it's really fascinating for me to think about the kind of collective totality of a writer's works.
Hmm. I'm thinking about a writer, I'm thinking about a musician. I'm a huge Paul Simon fan, and like
Oh
which
yeah.
were the songs that were bigger and which was, and we've seen him a number of times. We're going to see him again with my son. My son and I are going on the current mini tour that he's on. That is still a lot of cities, considering we went to the last one in 2018. But anyway, I digress. But I said to my husband one time, which event did you like the best? And he will like Graceland. We were here. This is exactly what I loved, blah, blah, blah. And he could hone on exactly the right experience. And he's much, I mean, I'm a Paul Simon fan. I'm not as big a music fan as he is. He will just sit and play music. I can't, I had to go upstairs yesterday, so I think I'm going to finish this book because I can't read with music. And it's really funny. He usually plays golf during the summer. I sit outside and read, and he comes back, and I can tell he's back because the music goes on outside. And I'm like, oh, God, please, headphones, 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 please, because I just can't concentrate the same
Yeah.
way if I'm reading a book. And I just can't do this. But it's are there those uneven songs? There are those uneven
Yeah.
moments where you just sit there and go, this one, not my favorite. This really great. This
Yeah.
reinterpreted even better. Yeah.
Yeah, no, it's true. And I think actually Paul Simon's a really interesting example because he's, as a musical artist, somebody who has inhabited so many different iterations of himself and he's reinvented himself so many times. But there's always that kind of really fascinating through line, which is also true of someone like Patricia Highsmith, who wrote a lot of novels outside of kind of the big hits that we know, right? Strangers on a Train, Ripley, Ripley Again, etc.
And you're right. Those are the books she's known for. But if you've read everything in between, you have a totally different understanding of how she got to book five was
Yeah.
because of what happened in book four. And when you're studying the books that way, sometimes I think we should go back to studying like that in school. I mean, I think that kids are so turned off on a lot of reading right now. Well, first of all, it's because
Yeah.
everything's online and everything's always wonderful. Like you'd never see a family having a problem like this family online. You just see the gems, the jewels, and everything else that's perfect. No children cry on social media. No children cry. I mean, one of my friends wrote, you should see this child. This is the one that was crying in the hallway the other day. This is the child, you know. But everything is so manicured right now in our lives. And everybody expects everybody, let's see, what's Paul Simon's line? Throw a hit up the pop charts. Everything is
Mhm.
supposed to be throwing a hit up the pop charts. And if you don't, and if your book doesn't, you've hit the times list with your last book. Is the measure of success on this book going to be, and it can't be. It can't be. I mean,
Yeah.
there's certain things that it just the way romantasy is out there right now and taking so many spots and whatever, you just there's certain things you're just not able to do. You're just not able to, do and fix around.
Yeah. And I think
So,
as a writer, I mean, at the end of the day, we all know that we're writing books to make money, right? I mean,
right,
we're trying to earn back money for our imprint. I
right.
take that very seriously. But at the same time, you also just want to be able to keep doing the work so that you can get to those later books
Yes,
that end up
yes.
really working. And, I think it's one of the things as a writer that's really difficult. There's always this question of, do you chase the market? Do you write in a different genre? Do you try to write a romantasy? Do you abandon what you've been doing? Or do you keep doing what you've been doing and wait for the market to come to you, or you
Hmm.
don't care? And a writer I love who I feel like does that so beautifully is Megan Abbott.
Hmm.
I love Megan Abbott's books. I'm so fascinated also by the way she has investigated everything from like noir to complex female friendships. Now she's in this like almost horror. I mean, the last book, Beware the Woman, had like a bit of almost like a horror quality to
Yes.
it. And
Yes.
I love her work and I'm just so interested in the way she keeps scratching the same itch, and
Mhm.
I find it fascinating. I think that is the challenge for writers and for editors and for imprints, what do you do? Do you kind of keep pushing in that vein down that path and see what happens, or do you pivot and see what else is out there?
And I think for her, it's been interesting as well. I interviewed her a couple of years ago for the Morristown Festival of Books, and one of the other authors hadn't showed up, and he was sick. So we said we could either go to audience questions, or she can talk about being a showrunner on
Yeah.
the show she did, and that was fascinating when she sat there and described it. And then I said, "So tell me what it's like then when you go sit down at your desk again and you're not in the writer's room." And I think that that's one of the ways that she's changed so much of what she's done because she's seen what she did before come big. And now
Mhm.
she's like, okay, where do I want to take a story this time? What do I want to do? Because I've sort of got the freedom of, I took it in another way when I put it on screen. My
Yeah.
favorite was the cheerleader movie where they only had a field to shoot the cheerleading scenes for 2 days. I thought that was precious. And then you find out that what you can't do on screen that you can do in a book is 15 cheerleader scenes that you can't do if you're going to be
Yeah.
doing the film.
Yeah, no, it is really interesting, and I'm fascinated by obviously the work that she's done writing on both her own show, but then also like on The Deuce
Yes.
and stuff like
Yeah.
that. But I don't know. I think I love the idea, and I'm very passionate about the idea that writers will be able to create these large bodies of work over time. But I think, it can be hard. I always feel grateful that I get to write another book.
Yeah. So when do you write? Do you write in the morning? I know you said you're still teaching, but when do you write? Morning, night? What are you?
I am the least precious writer on the planet. I like to write in the morning, but I will write, I write usually to word count when I'm drafting. And then when I'm not drafting, when I'm revising, it's totally different. I slow down. But I will get it done come hell or high water. Like if I put a chicken in the oven to roast, I will write for the 45 minutes, hour and 15 minutes that chicken's in the oven. If I have 15 minutes in between classes, I'll write then. If I know I need to get something done. I don't believe in like a routine because I
Hmm.
think life will always disrupt your routine. I mean, something's always going to happen. So I write whenever I have a spare minute,
Yeah.
literally.
I could just go do this, da da da. Do you slip in notes like when you're not writing? So, okay, you're teaching class. Class is leaving. You see something, you think of something, write yourself a note and hold it for later, or is it all in your head?
No, always write it down. And this is my advice to writers. Always write it down. So many times right before bed, I will think about a solution to a problem I had that day in the novel. And I always flip over and either write it by hand on a notepad by my bed, which I do now because I now no longer keep my phone in the bedroom, or just email it to yourself on your
Yeah.
phone because
Yeah.
you will not remember it in the morning, despite how great the solution is. And so I always write it down.
I sometimes have to read my drafts because I put it in the draft mail and it's all there. And I'm like, oh, is that what I'm supposed to put in the newsletter this week? So now I've started this thing like on Friday, this is what you're going to write about. Know
Yeah.
now. So that you don't sit on Thursday night going, I have nothing. I have absolutely nothing. Yeah, you have stuff. You pulled it together all week. It was in your brain, write it down. I can't remember. It might have been Taylor Jenkins Reid. I can't remember which author said she saw something while she thought of something while she was in the shower and she wrote it in the steam. And then
Oh, I love that.
again, I was like, oh, that's perfect. That's really, really perfect. So did you know how you're going to wrap this book? Did you know what was going to happen to the characters? And I'm not going to give anything away. And did you write towards that, or did that take many, many drafts?
I did not, I had initially hoped I would get to where the book is today in its finished state. So I had always hoped that I would get there, but one of the reasons I first abandoned the book is I didn't know how to make it work. I tried a lot of different ways to make it work and I couldn't figure it out. And I finally did. So I knew where I was going for kind of the first big twist. And the second, kind of the closing chapter of the book, I had always wanted that to be the implied subtext in the novel. And I remember I turned the book into my editor and she said, "Oh, well, I don't want to spoil the book, but
No,
she
no, no.
basically said that she didn't believe that what happened had happened." And I said, "Oh no, it totally happened, but you have to really read for the clues." And she said, "Oh, I think you need to be more explicit." And so she pushed me to write kind of the closing chapter of the novel right as we were kind of wrapping up edits because she felt like the reader, it really needed to be brought home to the reader. And I do agree with her. I think if you were really eagle-eyed, you might have guessed it and put it together, but I think it makes more sense having it kind of close in that way. So that part of the book I did not really think about until I was very far into the
Yeah.
revisions, which I
Right.
realize is a
Okay.
very vague thing to say because I
No,
don't
no,
want
no.
to
But you'll
spoil the
get it. If
book.
you read the book, you're going to get exactly what you're talking about. Completely, completely. So who sees your book first when you finish it? Who sees it first?
Yeah, so I do a lot of what I call trash drafts in the beginning. I will always write a really quick and dirty, like 70,000 word draft right out of the gate. I'll try to do it in a month and a half, just to get the book down and see what I have. And nobody reads that. No one ever reads that. When I do finally get to a point where I feel ready to share with someone, and that's usually around like the third or fourth draft. My husband always reads, and my agent always reads. And sometimes that book's ready to go to my editor. Sometimes it's not. So it's usually my agent and my husband are my first two readers.
First two readers. First two readers. So, how do you work with your editor? What do? You give her after your agent's seen it, after your husband's seen it, then you give it to her, and then you two do you get pages of notes back?
Yes, yes. I mean, pages and pages. I will say that my editor and I, this third book that I just delivered will be the first book that we're doing from sort of soup to nuts together. We're going from concept to finished product. With Saltwater, we sold the book on proposal, so it was already kind of pretty well formed when she bought it. This third book will be, it has been formed with her and we're doing it together from the beginning. So usually I give her what I feel like is a pretty solid draft. I like to work iteratively. So I actually like to do a lot of drafts, which I think can sometimes be tough on my editor because I think she'd rather me do, you know, all the revisions at once, but it's just my process. I like to work really iteratively and she will come back from that first draft usually with up to like anywhere from 10 to 14 single space pages of notes on the novel. And then I'll go back and make revisions, and those notes will get shorter and shorter until we get to the very end. And usually at the very end, I'm like, practically in tears because,
Can't do it
you're
again.
ready. You're just ready to be done. So that's kind of how we work together. And this will be my third book with her. I did my first book with her, Saltwater, and this third book I'm working on too. So we
Yeah.
really enjoy working together.
Yeah, and when you have that relationship, it's huge. It's really
Yeah.
funny because when people describe the notes coming back, they're single spaced. Somebody told me
Yeah.
the other day they got 9 pages of single space. I was like, I don't single space anything. I mean, I'm trying to figure
No.
out, I triple space even these notes, you know
Yeah.
what I mean?
Editors are the only people I've seen single space their
Nine
notes.
point type too. Yeah, whatever,
Yeah.
whatever, whatever, whatever. So let's talk about the title Saltwater. Was this always the title of the book?
No, the original title of the book, I have a copy of the UK book right
Okay.
here. The original title of the book is The Vipers,
Ooh.
which is what it remained in the UK. And it changed because Ballantine, my publisher in the US, felt that The Vipers leaned a little bit too sci-fi
I
fantasy in
agree. I
tone.
agree.
And so we then went through a renaming process and we ended up calling it Saltwater. And so I have to say, it's been a very interesting experience having the same book with two different titles
Hmm.
coming out. But I happen to feel very lucky that I got two really gorgeous
Hmm.
covers out of it. So yeah, the title was a late stage renaming, actually.
Well, here's what I really like about the title is because salt water can either be healing or corrosive. And
Yeah.
that's what I really loved. It was either one way or the other. And so we've got this picture of this woman from the back standing in the water, and you don't really know what's going to happen. You don't,
Yeah.
I picked it up and I was just like, oh, I just love the cover. It sounds really good. Listen to the audio. Went from
I
there.
do have to say, this cover, kudos to the cover designer for this
Gorgeous.
novel. It pops off a table amazingly. It has this great stabby font. It has kind of 90s Lisa Frank neon vibes to it. It's
Yeah.
really great.
Yeah. And then even the back, I mean,
Yeah.
everything, the pink, it really, really, really works. I absolutely, when I looked at it, I was like, wow, this is really popping. I
Yeah, they
say,
kept my vipers on the back here. I've got little snakes on the back.
okay. All right. There you go. There you go. So they played around with the title. Okay. So was this the first cover you saw, or did they play around?
We saw a few covers. The funny thing is, my editor is always right. She sent me this cover and she said, "This is your cover. I love it. We all love it." And they sent me a few other options, and I liked some of the other options as well. And they went back. It did not originally have this neon pink font for the title. And they went back and they went away and came back with the neon pink font, and I was like, this is it. And she had been right about the cover of the cloisters too. My editor had kind of been the one who said, this is the cover. We're gonna go with this.
Yeah, and
So
so many books right now are held up on a certain age of the person. Like you
yeah,
look at it, you know it's a 20-something cover, you know this, that, the other thing. You're not saying that looking at this book. You're looking, and this is a book could be enjoyed from 20-something on up, like
yeah,
40 plus. And it's not in that singular, there's some that I feel like are in this singular
yeah.
little pocket right now, and that's all they are. And I feel like this is one that can go here or it could go here. It can go all over the place. And I
And
think that's important.
I love as a writer working with characters of all ages. Like, I love a novel that has characters outside of their 20s who are, older. I mean, I like the dynamics between different generations. So I wanted to work with all of that in this book.
Yeah, and it absolutely did. So we've got this an audiobook that's narrated by an ensemble cast with Allison Ryan, Cassandra Campbell, and Carlotta Brenton. Um, I really enjoyed the audio. Did you always see it was going to be an ensemble cast? Did they come to you with that idea? What happened there?
Yeah, I feel incredibly lucky. I feel like the ensemble cast has really grown in audio, and
Mhm.
I feel like it's very popular with readers and listeners. And so they came to me and said, "We think this will be best with an ensemble cast." I loved that idea. And then they sent me a couple of different samples for each character, and there were great samples right away for Helen, and for Lorna, we actually went back and tried a couple of different readers because I felt like we weren't getting the grittiness I really wanted out of her voice.
Mhm.
Um, and we ended up finding really, really great voice actors for the book. So I'm really excited with how it turned out.
And what I'm liking too is because it's a then and a now. And
Mhm.
you're trying to always keep a then and now straight. And it'll be Naomi now. That you're getting the voices of what's going on. And when they do the male voices, they were very good as well. Sometimes that's hard to pull off. I'm always completely mesmerized by how they do this. It's
They're
really
incredible.
I'm
They're
listening
so
to Julia Whalen
incredible.
right now do a book, and I'm used to hearing her do, and she sounds completely different
Yeah.
doing this book. It's very interesting. So it seems like this would be film adaptation. Have you heard anything about adaptation, or is it still early?
We have news on the adaptation, but we cannot share it yet.
Yeah, see, and
So
well, I would have easily said if I was in film, I would have said easily pick this one up because what the thing is also, and I learned this in film because a couple of film producers came into my office one day and I was saying, oh, this would be a really good film. They got too many locations. And when you think about it, there's a lot in the house.
yeah,
A lot when you go out into town, but you can do this pretty easily. And what I've learned when Mitch Kaplan he started a film company. He runs Books and Books in Miami. And Paula Mazur came into my office and I'd say this and they go, too much. And I say this, too big. And I was really interested in hearing that because I hadn't really thought about that. And I find I watch differently now for
yeah,
what you would do and where you would do it. It's
yeah.
really different. Well, we'll hold for the news. And the next book from you, do we have a time frame on it? Do we know anything?
I think it's scheduled to come out in 2027, but
Okay.
might end up being 2026 depending on when we kind of deliver and it's completed. And it is, I will say this, it is kind of a folk horror novel set on the northern coast of California about a couple who have moved to a remote village because the wife has been hallucinating that their dead son is alive. And they move to this village hoping to cure her, but the village has other plans.
Mm,
Yeah.
okay, we'll get into that one when that's ready. I was, you sit across the table from your husband is probably thinking, okay, what is she thinking as she's eating this food? What is she? Because he's not, is your husband a writer as well?
He is a writer, but
Okay.
he's much more like a comedy writer than I
Okay.
am. So he has a very funny sense of humor, but I always joke he has the best sense of story of anyone I know. And I'm incredibly grateful to be married to somebody who has more narrative acumen than even I have. He is such a great reader of my work. And he's also, I said to you earlier, we met skiing. He's also a huge skier. And so I feel so lucky. I have to say, the reason I married him is I told a friend of mine that I thought he was cute. And my friend, who's also a skier, said, "Did you know he has a subscription to the New Yorker?" And I was like, I'm done. Like, it's all over.
We joke that my husband married me because we had season tickets to the New York Giants. And he goes, no, you're in the end zone, not the 50-yard line. And my husband's very quiet, but he comes out with a line like that. And you're just there like, again, gotcha again. Well, this has been such a pleasure, Katie. I'm so glad I read the book and we have the chance to talk about it. I really appreciate your time.
Carol, it's been such a joy. Thank you so much for having me.
And to our listeners, viewers, look forward to seeing you next time on Book Reporter Talks To.